A mysterious object was filmed in the skies above Alabama recently. Motorists traveling along Interstate 65, just north of Birmingham near Warrior, found themselves gazing at an extraordinary sight. Suspended overhead was a strange black entity that bore little resemblance to anything most witnesses had previously seen. Those who observed it described a flawlessly circular dark sphere maneuvering unpredictably through the air, all while emitting what looked like extended ribbons of black smoke. As growing numbers of people pulled over to observe or record photos and video footage, conjecture began to circulate at a rapid pace, yet a definitive explanation continued to elude everyone. Witnesses uniformly characterized the object's behavior as highly irregular. It did not glide steadily in the manner of a balloon, nor did it adhere to a predictable flight path. Rather, it appeared to veer off in new directions without warning, leaving behind sinuous trails that stretched across the sky. The dark haze seemed to persist for a number of seconds before gradually dissipating, lending the object an even more peculiar quality. Some spectators were convinced that the sphere itself was generating the dark fumes, whereas others felt that the trailing material looked more like elongated, flowing appendages extending from the object during its journey. This unusual spectacle captured the attention of a significant number of drivers, many of whom decelerated or pulled over entirely to take in the phenomenon. Discussions erupted across various social media platforms as individuals endeavored to determine the nature of what they had witnessed. Proposals ranged from secretive military aircraft to an uncommon atmospheric occurrence, while still others maintained that the object was indicative of something considerably more enigmatic. Wyoming UFO.
What happened?
Don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. It seems strange. You
You sure you're all right?
yeah.
You're not hurting anywhere?
No.
Okay.
Get you out of here and get you to the doctor as soon as we can.
In October 1974, a Wyoming hunter named Carl Higdon went through a series of strange events while hunting elk in the mountains. According to Carl, he was taken aboard a transparent craft before being returned to Earth, confused and unable to fully understand what had happened. His story stands out not only because of its unusual details, but also because it appears he may have almost vanished completely. Because of that, some researchers believe his experience could offer clues about both alleged UFO abductions and certain unexplained missing person cases that may have something in common. At the time, Carl Higdon was 40 years old and worked as an oil driller for AM Well Service in Riverton, Wyoming. On Friday, October 25, 1974, he unexpectedly had the day off, so he decided to spend it elk hunting. He packed his recently purchased 7mm Magnum rifle and drove toward McCarty Canyon, about 40 miles or 64 kilometers south of his home in Rawlins. Along the way, Carl stopped to help two hunters whose pickup truck wouldn't start. As they shared a cup of coffee, the pair suggested he would have better luck hunting deeper in the woods. Following their advice, Carl continued to the northern edge of Medicine Bow National Forest. He parked his pickup on a hillside and briefly spoke with a game warden who happened to be in the area. At around 4 o'clock that afternoon, Carl began walking into the forest. After traveling less than a mile, he reached a clearing where he spotted 5 elk standing several hundred feet away. What caught his attention was how perfectly still they were. He aimed at the largest bull elk and pulled the trigger. Instead of hearing a gunshot, there was complete silence. Even stranger, he watched the bullet leave the barrel in slow motion. It traveled only about 50 feet before striking what appeared to be an invisible barrier, then dropped straight into the snow. The elk never reacted, and Carl suddenly realized the entire forest had gone completely quiet. After picking up the bullet, he noticed something nearby that hadn't been there before, a transparent rectangular box sitting on the ground. It measured roughly 5 feet high, 5 feet wide, and 7 feet long. It looked like it was made of glass, and nothing was inside it. Feeling that something was behind him, Carl turned around and found himself face to face with a strange humanoid figure floating upright above the snow. The being wore a black suit that reminded Carl of a scuba diving outfit. He estimated it stood about 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed around 180 pounds. Its skin resembled that of an East Asian person, and its face looked mostly human, except that it had no chin and a sharply receding jaw. It had no ears or eyebrows, and its small eyes were slanted. Its stiff, straw-colored hair stuck straight out from its head like broom bristles, growing in small clumps spaced about half an inch apart. 2 rod-like structures extended from the top of its head, giving the appearance of antennas. The figure wore black shoes and a wide belt with a 6-pointed star where the buckle should have been. Below that was a yellow symbol on what looked like a small apron. Its legs curved noticeably outward. Instead of hands, there was a cone-shaped attachment extending from the right sleeve of its suit. Carl referred to the figure as a man because it appeared to have male features. The being floated across the snow until it stopped just a few feet from Carl. Without moving its lips, it asked, "Are you hungry?" Carl answered yes. A small packet containing 4 pills floated toward him, and the being instructed him to take one. Although Carl usually avoided taking any kind of medication, he swallowed one immediately. Later, he said it felt as though he had been controlled into doing it. The being then asked if he wanted to come along. Carl answered, "I might as well." He later explained that this decision felt like his own, because he had read stories about UFO encounters before, and had already decided that if he ever met beings from a UFO, he would go with them. The figure pointed the cone-shaped device at Carl, and in an instant, he found himself somewhere else. Carl's next memory was waking up inside the transparent rectangular box, which now seemed to be inside an even larger transparent structure. Both still appeared to be located in the forest. He was seated in a bucket-style chair with restraints holding his arms and head in place. Looking at the reflection in the glass above him, he could see the same 5 elk standing motionless inside a cage. The being from the forest was nearby, along with 2 others that looked almost identical. Carl remarked, "You've got my elk," and one of the beings simply shrugged. Moments later, the box rose into the air. Looking down, Carl could see his pickup truck where he had left it, but then the main being made a hand gesture, and the truck instantly disappeared. The next thing Carl remembered was seeing what he described as a glowing blue ball and a giant marble far below him, which he believed was the Earth. The beings told him they were returning home, saying their home world was 163,000 light miles away. They placed a helmet on his head with 6 wires extending in different directions and fastened a strap beneath his chin. Everything suddenly went dark before an intense light flashed on, making his eyes burn and fill with tears. Carl then found himself standing beside one of the transparent outer walls of the structure. Beyond it stretched a massive open area with no visible walls or ceiling. The bright light came from the top of a tall tower that reminded him of the Space Needle in Seattle, Washington. Lights rotated around its upper section. At the base of the tower, Carl saw several adults and children standing together and talking casually. 2 of the beings, including the one he had first encountered in the forest, guided him along a long walkway. This time Carl noticed he was floating just like they were. They stopped at a doorway that lifted upward before entering a large room. Inside, a panel measuring about 4 by 8 feet dropped down in front of him before sliding back into the ceiling. One of the beings then walked over and told him, "You're not what we want. We'll take you back." Carl was floated out of the room and returned to the bright light, which again caused his eyes to burn. The beings explained that Earth's sun affected them the same way whenever they visited the planet. He was then taken into what he described as a craft, where he met the same being from the forest. This time it introduced itself as Ausso One. Ausso told Carl that it was also a hunter. It explained that its people had been visiting Earth for many years to collect fish and animals, which they turned into food pills. According to Ausso, each pill could feed one member of its species for 4 days. It also explained that the ocean on its own world had turned yellow and all of its fish had died. Ausso then showed Carl a map of its planet, saying that part of the design appeared in the symbol on the front of its apron. It also explained that the 9 planets in its solar system supplied the magnetic force that powered their technology. Before Carl left, Ausso examined his rifle and commented that it would have liked to keep the primitive weapon, but wasn't permitted to do so. It also explained that its people wore black clothing because it protected them from the effects of Earth's sun. After the craft moved through what Carl described as a dark void, he realized they were now above the forest. Ausso then told him that it will see him. Moments later, Carl was surprised to find himself gently floating back toward the ground beneath the craft. Just before he landed, his foot slipped on a rock. He fell, rolled down a hillside, and injured his shoulder. After getting back up, he followed a nearby road until he reached a pickup truck. At first, he didn't even realize it was his own. Sitting inside, he heard voices coming from the CB radio. After figuring out how it worked, he made contact with someone who turned out to be his boss, Roy Fleming. Fleming asked Carl for his name and location, but Carl was so confused that he couldn't answer either question. Instead, he said, "I don't know. I am so cold." The only description he could give was that he was in a pickup with a funny stick in the middle, even though he had learned to drive a stick shift when he was younger. Fleming first heard Carl's voice at around 6:30 p.m. Earlier that day, Carl's wife Marjorie had returned home from work around 4 p.m. with what she described as an uneasy feeling and a strong urge to find her husband. She was soon told about Carl's CB distress call. Carbon County Sheriff Charles Ogburn quickly organized a search team that included Deputy Sheriff Ed Tierney and 4 local hunters. Marjorie called her friend Marilyn James, and Marilyn's husband Don drove both women out to help with the search. Heavy mud made the roads difficult to travel, and the sheriff's team struggled to reach the area where they believed Carl's truck was located. Marjorie and the others were instructed to remain on a nearby hill until they received further instructions. While they waited, Marilyn suddenly felt their truck shake before pointing excitedly at a large moving light in the sky that looked like a star changing colors. Everyone inside the truck watched it for nearly 20 minutes as it traveled in a wide arc, flashing brightly while changing from red to green to white. Around 11:40 p.m., the search team announced that they had located Carl. His pickup was found about 3 miles from the place where he had originally parked it. It was stuck in deep mud, yet there were no tire tracks leading to that location. While waiting for the search party to return to the forest gate, Marjorie, Marilyn, and Don noticed a large, bright red-orange light rising in the east. They assumed it was the sunrise, only realizing later that the actual sunrise happened hours afterward. As soon as the search party returned, Marjorie noticed that Carl was still badly confused and seemed to have lost much of his memory. He struggled to speak and didn't recognize her. When she talked to him, he stared at her, as she later described it, as though he was looking through her. When someone asked whether he had shot an elk, Carl looked through the windshield and replied in what Marjorie described as a sing-song voice. "They took my elk. They took my elk." Carl was clearly freezing, so Marjorie tried placing her coat over his shoulders. He quickly pulled away and shouted, "Don't touch me!" During the drive to Carbon County Memorial Hospital in Rawlins, Carl looked at Roy Fleming and asked why he wasn't dressed in black before adding, "Doesn't the sun burn you?" Carl arrived at the emergency room around 2 a.m. His eyes were watering heavily, apparently because the hospital lights bothered him. His shoulder hurt badly, and he repeatedly asked for his pills that float to you. Doctors found no cuts, bruises, broken bones, or bleeding. Tests also showed no drugs in his system. Dr. R.C. Tonko concluded that Carl was suffering from amnesic shock. When Marjorie asked him his name, he answered, "They keep calling me Carl. Who is Carl?" While recovering in the hospital, Carl was able to describe parts of what had happened, although many details remained unclear. Marjorie handed him a pencil and paper and encouraged him to write down anything he remembered. Carl drew the strange being he had encountered and wrote the word Enders. Later, the deputy sheriff mentioned that another man named Enders had been in a different part of the forest that same night. Carl also sketched a fork in the road, a rough drawing of the transparent craft, wrote down 2 unidentified addresses, and made another note about a truck. He was released from the hospital on the morning of Monday, October 28th. Dr. Tonko's x-rays showed nothing unusual. This surprised Carl because older x-rays taken years earlier had revealed scar tissue on his lungs from a previous case of tuberculosis. He had also suffered from several kidney stones before the incident, yet none were found afterward. Even so, he continued to deal with headaches and back pain for several days after he was rescued. When Carl later spoke with Sue Taylor of the Daily Times in Rawlins, he admitted that he still couldn't explain what had happened and even wondered if he must be crazy. Taylor's story became the first newspaper article about the case and was published on Tuesday, October 29th. Roy Fleming later introduced Carl to a local rehabilitation counselor who suggested he contact Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a psychologist at the University of Wyoming with an interest in UFO reports. On November 2nd, Dr. Sprinkle traveled to Carl's home to begin the first of several hypnosis sessions. During those sessions, Carl remembered more details about his experience, and Sprinkle invited a local art teacher to create a drawing of Ausso One based on Carl's description. Sprinkle also interviewed Marilyn James, Sheriff Ogburn, Dr. Tonko, Carl's hospital nurse, members of the search party, and several local residents. Everyone who knew Carl described him as an honest and hard-working man. Psychological and psychiatric testing at the University of Wyoming found no signs of mental illness. Sometime later, Carl suggested taking Marjorie and their son for a drive. He headed several miles south of town before turning onto a dirt road and driving up a hill, appearing to know exactly where he was going. More than 150 feet above them, the family saw a bright green object shaped like a large upside-down ice cream cone. At the same time, they noticed a strong smell that reminded them of dirty socks mixed with sulfur. Looking upset, Carl suddenly said, "I am late. I was to be here a few minutes earlier." A few nights afterward, Carl woke Marjorie and told her, "I know it is weird. I am in bed with you, yet I am out south of town. They are telling me, look for a black box." He believed they were letting him know they could reach him whenever they wanted. The thought deeply upset him and even caused the pain in his shoulder to return. On many trips to and from work, Carl said mysterious lights followed him through the sky, and other people reported seeing them too. Both Carl and Marjorie also believed their telephone was being tapped. Carl has claimed that he still experiences telepathic contact with Ausso from time to time. On one occasion, he told Ausso that Rawlins needed rain. According to Carl, 3 inches of rain fell the next day, followed by another 2 inches the day after. He then asked Ausso to stop, and the rain ended. Carl also believed that just before firing his rifle on the day of the incident, he had stepped into some type of force field that slowed the bullet before it reached the elk. At one point, Carl returned to the site of the incident with Don, Marilyn, and several others. They took photographs and searched the area with metal detectors, hoping to find the missing lead core from the bullet, but they never found it. At the place where the transparent box had appeared, they noticed burned leaves nearby and several trees marked with strange, weathered carvings. The bullet itself was examined by investigators led by Dr. Walter Walker, a metallurgy consultant for the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO. Walker concluded only that the bullet had struck something hard enough to turn it inside out. It was later examined by a metallurgist at the University of Wyoming. Not long afterward, the bullet disappeared from the university's safe. The story attracted widespread attention. A television crew from In Search Of traveled to Rawlins, along with a film crew from Japan. The National Enquirer arranged for Carl to take a polygraph test, which he passed. It was the first of several tests he would successfully complete. Years later, Marjorie felt driven to tell Carl's story and eventually self-published it in 2017 under the title alien abduction of the Wyoming hunter. In 2022, David Paulides covered the case in one of his documentaries about people who disappeared under unusual circumstances. He interviewed Carl and his wife again and pointed out similarities between this case and other disappearances in the same region. Paulides believed it was important that Carl appeared to have been dropped back onto the ground at the end of the experience. He said this matched hundreds of unusual death cases he had investigated where recovered bodies looked as though they had fallen from above. Carl's pickup also raised questions because there were no tracks leading to the muddy spot where it was found, leading to the suggestion that it had been dropped there as well. Researcher Linda Moulton Howe has also documented many animal mutilation cases where carcasses had broken legs, no nearby tracks, and compressed soil beneath them, leading to similar conclusions. Carl believed that some kind of medical examination took place after the mysterious shield or wall appeared in front of him, and that he somehow failed it. At first, he thought he had been rejected because the bright light affected his eyes. Later, he suggested that his vasectomy might have been the real reason. Another unusual part of the story is that the lung scarring and kidney stones he had before the encounter appeared to be gone afterward. Researcher Preston Dennett has collected more than 300 reports in which people experienced unexplained healing after encounters involving UFOs or strange beings. Dennett believes these encounters involve advanced extraterrestrials who are neither good nor evil and who heal people for reasons beyond simple testing or experimentation. Almost exactly 35 years after Carl's experience, another hunter disappeared in the same forest. Mark Anthony Strittmater had hunted in the area for 15 years before vanishing on October 19, 2019. Like Carl, Mark disappeared from a section of the forest where he had never hunted before. During an earlier hunting trip, Mark reportedly saw a black UFO that followed him for some time. Like Carl and many other missing people discussed in similar cases, Mark was of German ancestry, although he had never undergone a vasectomy. Ufologist Jacques Vallée has pointed out that many old stories about fairies, elves, and other mythical beings include an offer of food. In several legends, people who accepted food from these beings were rewarded with an endless supply of food. Irish folklore, however, says that anyone who eats food from the fairy world becomes part of that world and can never return to ordinary life. Many reported UFO encounters also describe beings moving in unusual ways, often floating above the ground. For example, the creatures reported in Pascagoula Abduction were said to float out of their craft, while the so-called goblins from the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter were described as gliding above the ground by swaying their hips from side to side. Another curious detail is that Ausso measured the distance from his planet to Earth in light miles instead of light years. Many reported UFO abduction stories include details like this that seem odd or scientifically inaccurate. One example comes from Italian abductee Pier Fortunato Zanfretta, who claimed giant aliens with gills told him they came from the third galaxy, a description that has no real meaning in astronomy. Looking at Carl Higdon's account, some people have suggested that he was originally meant to be taken away permanently, but was unexpectedly rejected and returned instead. Based on that idea, they believe some people who disappeared under unusual circumstances may have experienced something similar, but never came back. According to this interpretation, at least some of the missing persons cases investigated by David Paulides could be linked to the same unexplained phenomenon that has also been connected to reported UFO abductions and other unusual entity encounters.